Good evening. Good evening. My name is Todd Suddick. I serve as the program director for the Todd Anthony Bell National Resource Center on the African American male, and I want to welcome you to tonight's event, One Man's Journey from Learning Disability to College Graduate, the story of Cortez Harris. And I really do not have a deep, profound story to tell in regards to how this event came about. Just one day I was thinking about Cortez, and that's how really this all came about. I was thinking about Cortez and just thinking of his journey through Ohio State University, and I thought that this was a story that needs to be told. And just to briefly talk about the importance of stories. Stories have always existed, to entertain, to teach, to pass on wisdom, to record history, to represent beliefs, to explore new ideas, to share experiences, to build community, and express creativity. The story is the basic unit of learning, and as such, it is very important from our earliest years, listening to stories from our parents and careers. The word story actually is derived from the Greek word meaning knowing, knowledge, wisdom. Dialogue and discussion often stay at the level of the mind, but story can take us into the dimension of the heart. Hearing the stories of others breaks down the fears that underlie prejudice and opens us up to the perspective of others. Through story, we see more easily the unique challenges of every individual and how their beliefs, attitudes make sense within the context of their own experience. So again, I think that this is an awesome story. It has been my privilege to work with and to know Cortez. And we often, of course, recognize and praise a lot of our civil rights heroes and other significant Black people during this time of year. But I think sometimes it's also good to know the stories of some of the people that we know personally, that we have touched or that are part of our communities. And so I welcome you to this event. Just a couple of things I wanted to ask before I ask the next person to come up. If you have a cell phone, well, if you have, everyone has a cell phone. If you can please put it on vibrate or silent. Please feel free to tweet about this. So if someone says something profound, if what you thought I just said was profound, please feel free to tweet it. I just ask that you use the hashtag BNRC. And then also, if you want to reference Cortez, it's at unconventional Q. The Q is capital, the U is capital, unconventional Q. There will be a reception after this event as well, so I hope you can stay for the reception we have. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Jared Moore, former alum, not former, but alum of the Ohio State University, currently assistant principal at Harmon Middle School, to give some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suddick. This entire event, in addition to recognizing Cortez's journey, is really about paying it forward. And it's kind of cool to be here because I'm here now speaking for my mentee with my mentors. When I was here at The Ohio State University, Mr. Suddick was one of my mentors here at the university. So it is a pleasure to be here. I want to read a foreword because I don't from his book that I had the privilege of writing. I think it captures the essence of who he is and what tonight is all about better than anything else. So I read to you the foreword from Nothing But Skin by Cortez Harris. A skinny kid from Springfield arrived in the office to meet his intervention specialist. He was personable and uncertain, his eyes bright with insecurity. He awkwardly tried to play it cool, and he played it well most of the time. He had an individualized education plan due to disabilities in written expression and reading comprehension. In many ways, that IEP had defined him. He truly believed he was disabled, incapable of achieving. He was powerless. What he learned in school was that he was different, special, one to be pitied and enabled. And he was enabled to believe to believe others determined his capabilities. Low expectations became his sense of self. They set the limits for his confidence and effort. When asked about the future, he rattled off a list of careers he'd enjoy, but couldn't do, even if he tried. Then he was asked a simple question, one that challenged everything he had come to believe. Why not? The more he heard that question, the more he began to ask it himself. And he was inspired. Questions beget questions, efforts beget efforts, and soon he realized he set the limits. He defined himself. His disabilities became challenges that he eagerly welcomed. He fought hard and he won. He was empowered. That skinny kid from Springfield went on to attend the Ohio State University, where he gained notoriety for his promotion of poetry and self-expression. An award-winning spoken word artist, he's performed for numerous audiences, most recently opening for Sabrina Fulton, mother of Trayvon Martin. That kid was Cortez Harris. I was his intervention specialist. Nothing but skin shares his journey and conveys that we are more than flesh, more than the superficial exterior by which we are often judged. We are spirited individuals, and it is our spirit and nothing else that ultimately defines us. And with that, I'd like to play his first video, Imperfect Frame.
My mind is an empty aquarium. I am forced to sit in a special classroom where every wooden bookshelf is a reminder that I never escaped the 4th grade. Insults leak from the holes in the ceiling. This carpet is soaked with insecurities. Amputated pencils are scattered everywhere. The deceased sharpener tilts from that chip wall. The bulletin board tears off abnormal lesson plans. It is tired of being ridiculed by the whispers crawling beneath the doormat. The disfigured words on that blackboard spells brainless, and the chalk powder is poisoning my brain cells. I'm convinced that my imagination is below grade. The ruptured legs on my desk is buckling at the body mass of my sorrow. There is caution tape wrapped around my classroom. Every regular student glares through the tiny windows. They see nothing but corpse, gasping for wisdom. Here, college don't have classes like these. I have developed frightening routines. I jump out of my desk. I run to the back of class. I take cover. I don't want anyone to see me in a room infested with misspelled words. When anyone asks, what is your favorite class? I smile in eerie burden. I tell them fire drills or tornado warnings. That is the only time I feel normal. When the alarm clock blares, the chalkboard crumbles into dust. The nails on my desk loosen. It falls apart. I entangle the embarrassment in my fist. I pick all my broken pencils. I carry them with me. Whether dying or dead, my carcass feels alive with pride. Bleeding from my left shoulders, I walk with my peers. I am not a wheelchair. These hallways do not separate us by the diagram of our brains. We are all enclosed in the same cranium. My imagination is the same capsule of cells, and my mind are above grade level. This is what college must feel like. My brain and spinal cord never felt disconnected. As I pass my library, my confidence becomes hardcover books. These are classrooms where I belong. Now we all take cover. I don't need a referral to be here. When the alarm stops, attendance is taken. My teacher reads off 4 names. A piercing voice behind me reads off 20. I don't want to be here. You're asked to get up from my knees. Head to class. I don't want to move. Stigma cripples activity in my bones. As I walk by normal classrooms, the door slams, the light bulb shatters. Red eyes come peeling through the darkness. The insects of my insecurities come crawling out of my pockets. up my arms and across my shoulders, around my neck. My imperfect brain, a single file line looks like a snake. Everyone is staring with nets in their eyes.
And now I bring to the stage Mr. Cortez Harris, and also Mr. Lawrence Williamson, Director of the Frank W. Hill Black Jr. Director of Frank W. Hill Jr. Black Cultural Center for this interview dialogue.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
If you believe in the journey of Mr. Cortez Harris, stand up and show him your appreciation. Thank you very much. I just wanted Cortez to see how much that we appreciate him and what he has meant to the Ohio State University and the Columbus community. We certainly appreciate you. The day is about you, Cortez. So let's start it off. Let's talk about the journey. What makes Cortez Harris, Cortez Harris?
I had to think about this. What makes me me? Hear me now? All right. What makes me Cortez Harris? I will say my resilience. I wrote a post on my Facebook and I meant everything I said. And I said that having a learning disability is mentally exhausting. It can be mentally exhausting. It can be physically exhausting. It can be a great burden. And despite all the things that I had encountered with having a learning disability, I somehow defied the odds. I somehow achieved. So I would like to think that when I think of myself, I think of resilience.
Okay, let's start off. At what age and or grade were you diagnosed with an IEP, and that's Individualized Education Program, or learning disability?
My IEP has been with me my whole life. I vividly remember having my IEP assigned to me in elementary school. I vividly remember being pulled out of class, going to a small, non-traditional classroom. I vividly remember feeling very different, and I'll give you an example. When we had a spelling test, I was assigned 5 words, and the regular students were assigned 10 words. And when she would blurt out the words, I knew what words were not for me in terms of sound. And she would come over to me and she would whisper the word to me. And I think that's when I began to understand that I was different, and I had a learning delay.
Okay. What exactly was your learning disability?
My learning delay was in poor reading comprehension and poor writing expression. And I struggled vigorously with my writing and with my reading.
Okay. How did it impact you then, and does it still impact you at all?
In terms of my evaluation of myself at the time, how I perceived myself, it had a negative effect, a significant negative effect. I think it had a more psychological effect on me. When I think about having a learning disability and what I've been through, I experienced stigma. I think the stigma is associated with having a learning disability. I think I was a part of a stigmatized group. So when I had this learning disability, I was treated differently. I was teased. I'm sure my mom remembered me coming home and she's right there, and I would cry profusely because I just did not understand this label.
Okay, Okay, you talk about being stigmatized. Did that make you feel inferior?
Yeah, it did. I'll give you an example. I was always in a state of bewilderment. I could not understand why I was good enough to participate with regular students, the general population in our class, or gym, heck, even lunch. But the core classes, the ones I felt that really mattered, I never really had that experience to engage with the kids that I feel like were normal. I never really felt that sense of belonging. So yeah, it was really difficult for me, very difficult for me. And I would like to add, and we all may know, middle school is a very vulnerable period. It's a period where kids are very preoccupied with what people think of them. I like to think it's a moment or it's a stage of social comparison. Now you add a label to that, or you tell the kid that he has a learning disability. It's amplified. So I was always in a state of doubt, always in a state of fatalism, always in a state of feeling defeated, always in a state of feeling like I was never good enough.
Okay, this program is put on by the Bell Resource Center. And as part of that, I'm going to answer this question to try to put it into context. Does being an African-American male reinforce the concept of having an individualized educational program?
Well, what I do know is that diversified students, particularly African-American males, are overrepresented in the education population, special education population. And I recently learned this when I was doing my random reading. I'm like, wow, majority of kids with disabilities in terms of when you think of numbers, although African Americans make up a very small percentage in terms of like population, but they represent a large number in the special education department. So when in context of reinforcing that, the image of African American males, I began to see myself as part of that population. And I couldn't understand because I always knew I had some sort of like intellectual delay at the time, but I always felt like I was, ingenious, I would say. And I would say this, in my art class, I always got an A in art. I was a phenomenal artist in terms of drawing, and I would always get an A. And that particular art teacher will always reinforce the concept that you are brilliant, you matter, you are smart. And I always think like, why is this not transferable in the classroom setting? I do not want to say that because I was smart in art, that's the only thing I was smart in. It was a matter of, I wish my teacher at the time would have valued my artwork, encouraged me with my artwork, and I would have transferred over in the classroom setting. I was sharing this with a friend the other day. I said, anytime I got an F, or a D, or a C, something that I felt like represented failure, I would draw. That was my coping mechanism. And my art teacher always comes to me like, Cortez, that is amazing, that is amazing, that is amazing. And I just think, why can't my math teacher say that about me? So that concept is something I really had a difficult time dealing with.
Now, I was a former art teacher, and taking in consideration that most of your problem students, which were considered to be African American, were actually put into art class because they didn't feel that they had the intellectual ability. But what people fail to see is the creativity and the genius that if the school system can pull out of you in a different teaching way, it can take you to the next level. So that's very valuable for what you're saying in regards to that. Now let me move on. If at all, how did having a learning disability impact your family?
My mom, she shared this with me recently. She said she was in a IEP meeting, and she said that, I believe it was an IEP teacher at the time, this is middle school, and apparently high school, and she said that they said that I will never be able to function on my own. And I remember her telling me, like, she said, I was freaking out. Like, my mom's a nervous wreck, by the way. She is. So, that, for a
intervention specialist or teacher to tell my mom that it just created this whole emotional outbreak. And my dad is, he's a God-fearing man. He said, we're gonna pray about this one. We're gonna pray about this one. So I think, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna call her out because I can do that. I was having a conversation with her about my learning disability because we both recount things, and she was going to prepare something, but she didn't because she was nervous. And she said Cortez got in special education classes in high school. I said, Mom, actually I was in special education classes, elementary, middle school. She said, well, I don't want you to argue this. I don't think that you are, you have a severe learning disability. I said that's part of my story. And I don't blame her. I think the stigma attached to having a learning disability, it reinforces these type of concepts that when you have a learning disability, that you are handicapped, that you are enabled, that you do not have the ability to thrive. So, and bless her heart, I know she didn't mean anything wrong or anything like that, but it just reminded me that this is why I guess it's my mission to sort of educate people about having a learning disability. And I was telling the director from Office of Disability this morning, and I had an opportunity to talk to her. I said, my concept now of having a learning disability is that it's all about learning your unique style of learning, tapping into your unique style of learning, and embracing that.
I know for myself when I was growing up, I had a lot of friends in special education that had learning disabilities. Once you were labeled, that followed you all throughout high school and everything. And that certainly impacts you. Did you feel coming to the university that you still had that stigma and that label?
At that point, the stigma, it lingered, but it wasn't, it didn't hinder me in any way. And I'm gonna get back to that because I need to add context to that. In middle school, I would intentionally arrive late. I had an issue with tardiness. What they did not understand was I didn't want anyone to see me walk into these non-traditional classrooms. I would wait until the hall was vacant. And I'm saying this because I want you to understand how this stigma is associated with having a disability. And I would wait till the hall was completely vacant until you can hear echo, and I walk in my class. And I always act, and I look at and I was very fixated on the clock. And I said, and I always, 5 minutes before the bell ring, I'm like, can I please get a restroom pass? I always insist on having a restroom pass. Why? Because why? They never could comprehend why. But really, it was my way of getting out the class before anyone could see me. Because when I was in my classroom, I saw the normal kids looking, pointing their fingers, laughing, ridiculing me. And most of the time, I didn't get the restroom pass because it was just too frequent. I was always asking. So I would linger around the classroom and I would just wait till the bell would ring. And then when the bell would ring, I would wait till the class, the hall was vacant again. Then I would go to my next class and I was late. And when I got caught being in class, when my peers saw me in the classroom and they were, oh, Cortez, he's in special education classes, those voices carried on with me to high school. And there was one point in high school where, and I have a poem called Poor Spell in my book where I talk about how my freshman year in high school, I wrote a letter. I don't know if I was writing too, I just wrote a letter. And conceptually, I've always been a good writer in terms of thinking about ideas, but my spelling, my grammatics wasn't that great. And I left the letter in my art class. I felt comfortable to write in my art class. And a group of kids, I was walking down the hallway, and they blurred out my name, Cortez, and they started reading my letter, how it would sound, how I spelled it out. And they're like laughing and ridiculing me, like, you can't spell. I'm walking down the hallway, and I hear all these kids just derailing me. So at that point, I could not separate that from going into college. And I was telling the director from Office of Disability that I carried that with me into college. And I did not receive accommodation until my junior year in college. I didn't want no one to see me walk into the Office of Disability.
with most families, and specifically African American families, being normal is so very important. If you are not considered normal, there's a stigma of being crazy. You know, what's wrong with that boy? Something's wrong with that boy. Do you feel, or let me put it this way, do you think your family was ashamed of you having a disability?
I don't think they were ashamed. I think they were quiet. We didn't really talk about my learning disability. Only time we would talk about it, well, I guess when they felt comfortable talking about it was in the confinement of an IEP meeting. But at home, they didn't talk about Cortez having an IEP. I'm not sure why. I think maybe it's hard to understand because you have to understand having a learning disability is invisible. People often associate disability with physical impairment. It's hard to see a learning disability. It's not obvious, right? So you can hide it really well. So why do we need to talk about it?
Yeah, and I want to clarify that too, because it's not your family only. There's a lot of families, there's an IEP, there's a disability. It's almost to a point of saying, what do we have to do to get this person to be normal, not taking into consideration the brilliance that that person may have. It just might have limitations with that brilliance. So I just want to clarify that as well for you. Now you said that your parents are here.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this question. If either his mom or dad can come and say something about Cortez?
I'm looking for my dad, Rick Harris. He's not here yet. My mom is.
Can you say a little something? What makes Cortez Harris to his family, to his mom? Just what makes, when you bring him up,
I already knew that he was trying to put me in. I had to do that.
Do you mind coming up so people can hear you? See, that's our community. Y'all hear that? Oh, Lord, that's that spiritual foundation out here.
I had written something, and I even called him, and I read the whole thing to him, and he said, Mom, you want to kind of make that short. I said, well, with me, when I write, I can do better with writing instead of explaining to y'all. You know, I get a little nervous, but I always knew he was going to be different anyway. And that's why I named him Cortez. I could have named him after his dad, Ricky, and he was like, name him Ricky. I was like, just too many Rickies out there. I said, something different. So, you know, and I have 6 kids, and he's the oldest, and he is such an inspiration. You know, he's just a good kid. I'm very crying because with his siblings, you know, they look up to him, so he is a good mentor to them. And I have, you know, with my daughter, she struggles in class now, and he helps her, and it's just like, you know, I said, all that time I'm worried and stressing about you, you know, oh my God, he's not going to make it. We have to follow him throughout his life to, you know, guide him to anything that he has to do. And when his dad said, don't you worry about that, we're not going to claim that. So he overcame all those obstacles, and I am so proud of him because he's teaching me something now. And he's just a wonderful son, and I can't ask for anything better than that. And I'll just bless him for him. And did your dad live here? Where's he at? Ricky, can you come up here?
Yeah, our question basically is, what, to your family, what makes Cortez Harris, Cortez Harris?
That's the question.
That's the question.
What makes Cortez Harris?
From the family perspective.
He's unique in a lot of ways. I see a lot of myself in him. You know, he overcame a lot. I was, you know, had him at a young age. But what makes him unique is this, you know, he takes the cards that he's been dealt with, which, you know, I took the cards that I was dealt with, and you play the best hand you can with it. So, you know, he doesn't look at limitations. He stays positive in the sense that, you know, people can say one thing, but you have to believe in your heart different, and then you have to just go with that. So, and that's kind of how I've been, you know.
Thank you. So let's give both of the parents a round of applause, please. established that when you have a disability, that you're going to be looked upon as less than. So let's go back to your educational, your elementary, your middle school, and your high school experience and things. Were you made fun of?
All of the time. It's hard talking about this. When I was in middle school, I was always captivated by spelling bees. Who's seen the Keelan Bee? Which is, the irony of that is I was a horrible speller. And I would sit and I would, and at the time people knew that I had a learning disability because it's obvious that, you know, that smaller classroom setting is for the kids who have challenges with their academics. And I was always singled out. And I would sit in, you know, when they had those spelling bees, I would sit there and I would just be marveled by, oh my God, I wish I was Joe Kennerly. And Joe Kennerly, by the way, was the best spelling bee person ever. I think he's better than Keelan Bee, by the way. And a friend of mine's at the time, well, I would say, you know, we socialized. He said, why are you paying attention? Like, you have an IEP, you have a learning disability, you'll never be able to make it up there. So I'm like, oh. So after that, I didn't go to spelling bees. I just would just go to the bathroom, or I would go wander the hallway. And like, I'm not supposed to be there. So that's one incident. And if I, like for example, when the fire alarms will go off, or the fire drills, or tornado warnings and stuff like that will go off, I will hear kids just giggling, laughing at me. I will peer over my back and look, and people be pointing, and I'm like, wow, wow, wow. You know, this is so unfair. But I like to think it was a misconception. They could not understand me. They could not understand my peers who had learning disabilities. And I always would think to myself, why can't these teachers go in these classrooms and just tell these normal kids about us? Talk about us. I don't want to be in there, but talk about us. And I think they may become a little bit more sensitive to our circumstance. Not only that, but they may be able to understand us and also find similarities, because although I have learning disability, I still enjoyed a lot of things that they enjoyed. I just, in terms of, you know, applying myself in the classroom, it was just different. My way of applying myself was different than their way. And I think if the teachers will go in this class and let them know, like, you know, we all have unique styles of learning. And it's interesting because I took a Shakespeare class in high school, junior year when I went to Middle High School. And that was the very first time I really felt like I belonged, because we were all trying to decipher what Shakespeare was saying. Nobody could understand. I'm like, yeah, because his writing was so ambiguous. And I'm like, and I think that is what got me into poetry, because I can write complex things that really don't quite make any sense. You find your own meaning, and we all just share this sort of uncertainty about the poem. I'm like, what? I think it means this. No, I think it means that. I think it means this. I'm like, we're all confused. This is what it feels like to have a learning disability sometimes. So, share that.
Were you ever bullied? Because sometimes when people feel that you have a learning disability, not only do they make fun of you, they also get aggressive with you physically.
Yeah, maybe once a week. If I went to the water fountain, this guy named Corey, who just could not understand me, like if I was getting out drinking from the water fountain, he would push my head into the water fountain, dummy, and then run. There's been a few instances where kids just drop their books, their traditional books, that you can't understand these concepts, you know? You can't pick these books up because you don't understand them. Those are some type of, I guess you can, that was bullying to me. And I always had a very strong core. Like, although I encountered these very unfortunate incidents, there was a peculiar hope. I knew I would be someone. And I became my own source of joy to a certain degree, because no one really talked about my learning disability. And Mr. Moore capitalized on that. Right there, he was my intervention specialist, also my IEP teacher. He was just, and I remember because I left Springfield, Ohio, home of John Legend, by the way. And I moved to Columbus, Ohio because I wanted a whole new environment. I just wanted to revamp my character, my surroundings, and I begged my parents to let me move with my aunt. They were resisting at first, but they finally gave in because I have a lot of tenacity. I won't give up. And I went to Reynoldsville High School, and I got this note, and it was obviously from someone from the special education department. And he said, come and see Mr. Mama. I'm not going. Because I thought if I left, now the real reason I thought if I left Columbus High School, Springfield City High School, my IEP would go with me. I can get away from it. So I'm like, if I go to Reynoldsville High School in Columbus, my IEP will be back in Springfield. So, and I know IEP can't travel all the way to Columbus. This is what I was really thinking. And then he found me, I'm like, dang. So we sit in the classroom, he's just looking at me, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with me, I'm fine, I'm good. My grades is really good because I just got to the school, everybody starts off with A's, right? My grades is good, I don't need you. But, you know, he knew my record, he saw my grades, obviously he saw my IEP and he knew that I had a delay. And he just said, you know, he was very strength-based. I don't think he focused on like my deficits. He always focused on like my unique attributes. Very rarely will he ever use the word disability. I don't think he likes the word disability. He will always just focus on who I desire to become. And he would challenge me because I remember I was talking about just going to the Coast Guards. I'm going to the Coast Guard. And the concept of college didn't hit me until I talked to him. Didn't think about it. College never came to my mind until my junior year of high school. I'm like, and he was like, what about college? What about Ohio State? I can't get enough Ohio State. I went there and he helped me draft up my it was like the essay, admissions essay. He had it right. He helped me draft that up. And I started off at the regional campus, OSU North. And I did good enough to transfer to the main university, which is here, my sophomore year. So give him a round of applause.
Yeah, indeed. We're going to get ready to transition you from your high school to your college as we move on, but I see Dr. Alexander out there, and one of the things that he helped to teach us that you not only have a physical type of bullying, there's a psychological type of bullying too. So your work doesn't go day, Dr. Alexander. But the other part is, when you went to Reynoldsburg, right? Mm-hmm. Was it any easier to make friends at Reynoldsburg opposed to Springfield?
It was much easier. No one knew me. No one. So I came into the high school with this agenda. And the agenda was, I'm going to be better. And I'm going to be even better at hiding my disability as a part of that. And that was the goal. The goal was to not reveal that I had an IEP, to try to not feel like I need to benefit from it, and that's when Mr. Moore found me. But because he focused on my positive attributes, I had an inner knowing that I was going somewhere, and despite the academic challenges that I had, I was just confident because someone was confident in me. So if I heard anyone insinuate or imply that I was less of an individual because I have a learning disability, it did not affect me emotionally like it did in middle school. At the time, I didn't have anyone root me on in terms of like staff, educators. So, I mean, his impact had a ripple effect in high school. So the moment he focused on, he didn't have a pathology approach. He didn't just focus on my deficits. He didn't focus just on my deficits. The moment I was like, oh, I have strength. Oh, I have strength all along. I really did. So I began to project myself with confidence. I walked to school more confident. Even though I knew I had this past, I'm like, it's not going to define me anymore. And I'm not going to measure myself to based off of merely what I've been through. I'm only ultimately going to measure myself based off of what he thinks about me. And I held on to that because I didn't, those words like, you know, you're brilliant, you're smart, you're going somewhere, like they resonated with me. Like these are words I've never heard before. So I think I'd like to give him the credit of helping me to establish friendship because, you know, sociability is important. You want to be able to have social skills. And when you have confidence, I think your social skills are enhanced. So when I have someone believing in me, by nature, I'm going to interact with people more confidently. I'm going to smile more. I'm going to take the initiative to meet people and not feel like I have to hide from people. So I hope that makes sense.
Let's talk about your transition from high school to college. All right, you finished high school, now you're getting ready to go to college, Ohio State University. How did you make the adjustment? How did you do?
So it took me 5 years to graduate from Ohio State, by the way. When I took my general electives, it was just a horrible experience. And I would say this, it wasn't until I was a junior, and that is when I started receiving accommodations from the Office of Disability here at Ohio State. When I graduated from high school, and I want to say this, who all know OGTs are? Y'all know what those are? OGTs, okay, good. It took me my senior year, I had one more chance to pass my science OGT or I wouldn't graduate. I was excited when I found out that I passed my OGT, but the idea of it took me this long, and I'm hearing all these people passing it the first time, and it took me this long to pass the science OGT. When I found out that I was entitled to graduating, I carried that with me, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going back there no more. So when I matriculated to college, I felt like I had to regain my confidence. And I felt like associating with the Office of Disability or any special accommodations was going to ultimately destroy my confidence, the little confidence I had left. So I went 3 years in college without receiving any accommodations, and my grades reflect that. I want to be clear about that. My grades reflect that. I was not getting probation several times. I remember I was sitting outside the health center crying because I'm like, I'm going to drop out. There's no way I can make this. Like, this is too difficult for me. Like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to make it. College is not for me. This is a joke. I don't just go off and just work at Kroger's and bag groceries. I don't think I can do this. And then I had to talk with you, and I had to talk with Todd. And again, reflecting off of Mr. Moore, they start focusing on me as a writer. And that really emboldened my confidence, because they're like, if you can write poetry and you can speak before all these great people and you can do this, dude, you can graduate from college. So I'm like, cool, I can graduate from college. I guess I can do this. So my confidence was elevated a little bit, but I was still struggling. I remember I took a history exam and I flunked the exams 2 times. And I had to write it. It was an essay, 3 essays you had to write in class. You had an hour to write the essay. I flunked that. I think I just started writing anything. It had nothing to do with history. I think I was talking about when I was at home and how much I didn't want to be here, because it was just too much. And the professor looked at me and was like, I think, how did he say? He said, do you have a learning disability? Do you have something? Because, you know, this doesn't look normal. He told me that this doesn't really look normal. We have an Office of Disability here. I'm like, really? I knew that, but I didn't know. He said, you should go there, or I'm afraid that you're not going to graduate from college. I said, oh my gosh, I gotta go here now. And I went and they pulled up my iPad. I'm like, where did y'all get this from? Like, how did this come? Where did this come from? Like, it was supposed to be at Roseburg. Like, how did y'all like physically go? Like, we're getting this IEP. Like, get that away from me. You know, he said, Cortez, you know there's 2,000 students at Ohio State University that have a learning disability and look just like you? It's invisible? I said, no. She said, 2,000. I said, oh, wow. He said, so, and of these 2,000, majority of them are surpassing. At Ohio State here? Yeah. But they have accommodations. I said, really? Wow. and they offered me extended time, and they offered me a secluded room where I could go and take my exams on the computer. And from that point on, I was A's after A's after A's, top of A's after top of A's, and I maintained a 3.7 in my college. So, yeah.
College, and then I want to go to your poetry because we're going to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. What was your major here and why?
My initial major was special education, but I was afraid to take on that. I thought that I would be reliving too much that I wasn't ready to bear. So I decided that I want to affect change, be a change agent. Is education the only way to make a difference, a tangible difference? And someone proposed social work. I never heard of social work before. I'm not social work. What is that? He said, you use the word change agent. That's what social work is. I'm like, okay, what is social work? I still don't get it. And they said, you know, it's a field that serves. I'm like, oh, that's all I need to hear. I didn't care what population they serve. I just wanted to serve, but I didn't want to do it in the context of school. Again, that was just my personal fear. I didn't want to go back to that. So I majored in social work at Ohio State University. Great staff, very supportive. Dr. Shamaya, she was amazing. She believed in me, an African American professor in college social work. My academic advisor, Alexander, she was amazing. So that was my major, and it was a phenomenal major. And they knew me in my major. They knew me. I was all up in my major, having read all the time.
Now let's get into your poetry as we wrap it up there. But one of the best feelings I've had was I was at your graduation in social work, and I was watching everybody go through, and I seen everything that was going on. And at the very tail end, they called it this young poet who just received his degree, who was doing a special poem for social work, and this is technically not done at the Ohio State University. He mentioned Cortez Harris to do a poem as they close out the ceremony. How did it make you feel?
Wow. It made me feel like it is okay to be different. Some of the concepts that I had, like I was courageous. I would come to professors like that. I actually went to Dr. Mishama. Like I just got back from New York. We just placed second. It was 86 colleges. I represented Ohio State. We placed second. They don't know that. All I know is about sports. But yeah, Ohio State had a poetry team that placed second in the nation, and I was on that team. Yeah. And I asked Dr. Mishama if I could perform in her class, in our class. And she said, poetry in the classroom? You've never done this before. Are you serious? I said, yeah. I have a group piece that I done with my friend who's going to perform. She's like, okay. And I performed the poem in class, and so people are looking like, what the heck is going on? This is not like a traditional PowerPoint slide, anything like this. They're like, what is this? We performed in the class, and she pulled me to the side. She said, I think you should consider when you do graduate, because you will graduate, you should consider performing at a graduation. We have like a smaller graduation. I said, because first I thought she was talking about like the shoe. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. You're not, no, I'm not. I can guarantee you I will not do that. She said, no, it's like a smaller for social or college social work. I said, you sure? Just the college social work? She said, yeah. And this was like a year before I actually graduated. And I was sitting home one day and I said, and I just emailed her. I said, I want to perform at the college social work ceremony. She said, great, you're in. I said, are you serious? She said, yeah, you're in. So I had the honor to write a poem about serving our most vulnerable population and celebrating college of social work, my journey. And I performed the poem. And it was cool because I'm not going to lie, I didn't because I struggled my first 3 years, my cum wasn't where I wanted to be. It was a 2.9. So I didn't get like honors or anything like that. So when they had everybody stand up who had honors, I was sitting there like, oh God, this is so embarrassing, you know. but I got to celebrate my way of being a scholar, and that was poetry. So when they called me up to perform poetry, I'm like, I got my confidence back, yeah. So I wanted to share that.
Let's talk about, for wrapping up, your accomplishments. You've had many of them. You just have a book, Nothing But Skin. What are your major accomplishments? And tell us a little about the book. They say never blow your own horn, but you're around friends. We want you to really toot your horn very loudly.
Well, recently I had the opportunity to perform before Reverend Al Sharpton. And it was interesting because after performing during this interview, he randomly was like, man, give that boy another round of applause. That poem tore me up. That was an amazing poem. I'm like, wow, Reverend Al Sharpton just compliment my
And I wanted to tell you, you should write him for whatever you have in your next one, to get him to say those words to you, because that was very, very true. Before Reverend Sharpton spoke, he said, wait a minute, I got to get through that poem that young man just did. They were his exact words to let you know the intimacy and the profoundness of that poem. So let's give him a round of applause for that.
The opportunity to perform before Trayvon Martin's mom, which I want to share the story because this was a surreal experience. Before I went to perform, Levi's mom, my son, by the way, Levi, give him a round of applause. She texted me, she said, I'm in labor. I'm like, I have to perform before Sabrina walked in. She's like, oh my God, so I'm freaking out and asked my mom a question. She said, you'll be fine, Just perform. Levi's not gonna be here at 6. I said, yes, he's gonna be here at 6. I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna be a bad dad. But I'll never forget, I was just going through it. I'm like, I have a child on the way. I'm about to perform before Trayvon Martin's mom. Like, this is so like crazy. And I remember her coming back and she said, wait a minute, you have a child on the way? I said, yeah. She said, boy or girl? I said, a boy. And she just got really emotional and just got really quiet. She said, give me a hug. So, I mean, that was, I think, by far the best experience I had at Ohio State. That I remember, I vividly recall sitting back watching this horror story about Trayvon Martin and just seeing how vulnerable and how just destitute she was, and to hear that somehow, in some way, I made an impact. And then I know that I had to run out after the event because I had to go to the hospital. I wasn't missing Levi come. But they said that they gave her a copy of my poem in a plaque. So that was amazing. That was amazing. And I had the opportunity to perform before actor Danny Glover. And I remember performing, and he actually came up to me. He said, dude, when I was listening to your poem, I was like watching a movie. Like, it was really like a movie. And he like impersonated. I'm like, really? Like, when you said the crosses and stuff, man, that was deep. I said, thank you. And again, I love to talk about this because not only was I was a student, I was very engaged and active in the poetry community. I helped co-found Never Let Your Pen Dry, which is a poetry organization, still current today. Still going.
He's right in this room right here.
Yeah. I helped co-found that. I was the president for that organization for 3 years. We had the opportunity to travel to Michigan University. We traveled to California where we performed. We traveled to New York. And these were like all Big Ten schools, Ivy League schools. It was just an amazing experience. So I got to showcase my poetry on that type of platform. So those are some of my accomplishments. And of course, the book deal. It was a pretty cool experience because at the time I didn't think I could publish a book. Never thought that. And a friend of mine, and this is what I mean by people, I tell people this all the time. So you cannot achieve in isolation. You cannot. And there's going to always be someone who's going to believe in you when you cannot seem to believe in yourself. And those individuals, I would say, pay attention to because that grows. And this individual named Educator, she was like my sister in poetry. And one day she said, Cortez, there's this publishing opportunity through Writing Nights Pressman. If you send a simple manuscript, you have a chance to win a full-length book deal, buddy. I said, okay, why are you telling me? She's like, because you should submit. I said, no, I'm not submitting anything. That's why I don't do that. I would go to Barnes & Noble and read a book, but I ain't submitting for no book. She said, no, I think you're a writer. You're a writer. I think you really should submit. So I'm like, oh, whatever, I'll try. So there was a deadline. There was obviously a deadline, and I submitted my manuscript a minute before the actual deadline cut off because I was that scared. I'm like, what am I getting myself into? And I submitted for the deadline, and I found out that it was a performance part. So they grade your writing, and it was like, I think it was like 20 authors submitted, well, prospect authors submitted for this manuscript. And I found out that I won the writing part. Like, I have a learning disability, right? I won the writing part? Are you serious? So give me another round of applause. Doesn't make any sense, does it? And I won the writing part, and I won the performance part, because not only am I a writer, I believe I'm a performer too. And I won that part, and he said, and he told me this, he said, I'm aware that you have a writing disability. He said this, I'm like, dude, how do you know that? You wrote in the book, duh. He said, not only am I gonna give you a published deal, but you can take as long as you want to write this book. No deadline. We normally have deadlines, but I'm gonna give you your time to write. Your time, and that's your time to celebrate your success. I said, dude, this book will be done in like 12 months. And I wrote the book in a year, so.
Okay, we're in the life and the journey of Cortez Harris, and you're going to get ready to go over there shortly and sign your books and everything, and I know Todd's going to ready to come up here. Let's give some parting words so these people can go bon voyage as you reach the apex of their destination.
I've been thinking about this a lot. It takes a lot of courage to inspire someone. It really does. And I think, and when I say courage, you have to really believe in your story. You have to be committed to your story. I'm very nervous standing before all of you, but it takes courage to inspire. So I would encourage you in all your future endeavors, because I know we have a lot of amazing people in the building. If you have a story, share it. And be courageous, because there's so many people who need it out there. And I was one of them. I'm gonna tell you right now, like I said before, I can't believe that the very first time the idea of college came across my mind is when I was a junior in high school. Some kids know they're going to college when they come out their mom's womb. I didn't think about college, wasn't on my frame of thinking. But Mr. Moore went to Ohio State University in OH, and he had the courage to share that with me and share his success. So I want to thank you all for coming out, listening to me, and celebrating my success.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cortez Harris.
All right, we can do better than that. Let's hear it again for Mr. Cortez Harris. Mr. Williamson, I would like to ask Mr. Cortez Harris and Mr. Jared Moore if they can come to the podium. So in appreciation for sharing your story, Cortez Harris, you know, I don't think this is going to be a one-time thing. We talked about this before, and that's one of the reasons why we're making a video of this. And like you said, it's important to get your story out there. So on behalf of the Todd Anthony Bell National Resource Center, wanted to give you our signature print of the picture of Todd Bell returning a punt for a touchdown in one of the games against Michigan by the artist Sean McKim. It's called In His Hands. And also some Bell National Resource Center goodies, a pad folio, a very nice pen as well. So thank you again. And then also for Mr. Jared Moore, just for generally being awesome. But in regards to your work, you know, you and other education administrators out there are really our unsung heroes. And I think for many people who are in the audience, you know, I know for myself, there are definitely people that I could think back to either in high school or junior high or elementary school that believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And so it's important that we have people like you in our educational system to help people like Mr. Harris, help people like myself and everybody that's out here in the audience. So thank you as well. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to have a brief question and answer. And so if you have a question, I just ask that you raise your hand. But I'll point to you if you can stand up and project to the best of your ability your question. We'll go through a couple of questions, and then we're going to do a raffle drawing for books. So Mr. Cortez Harris, the Prosper Books, we will raffle off a couple of books, and then from there we'll close out. So any questions?
What is one of your poems sound like in your voice?
One of my poems, what did it sound like in my voice?
What do you do it now?
I think it's calling for a performance.
We'll get to that.
I'm just saying.
We'll get to that. A lot of my poems sound, I guess you could say I'm a sensitive writer. I write about a lot of sensitive subjects. I dare to write, and lack of a better word, and I don't hold back.
It's very raw and emotional. I'd say his performance is always the first time he performed at Ohio State, I kind of, and Mr. Adams back there, we kind of went just to see if it was really happening. I was like, what, you doing a poetry slam? Shut up, no you're not. So we showed up and he had me in the back crying, I'm not gonna lie. Crying like a baby.
And I want to add, Mr. Adams back there, he was my math teacher, and he was also critical in ensuring my academic success. So give him, you said Mr. Adams? Give him a round of applause. These are young African-American educators, so contrary to popular belief, we doing something.
Any additional questions? Yes.
You mentioned that referred to yourself as so did you ever feel like, even though you were labeled with this disability, that you just have a flood of just incredible ideas or inventions, or just the creativity would be so immense that it would just be a flood within you? Did you ever feel like that?
All of the time. And I was weird, like my mom said. She didn't use the word weird, but I was very weird. I would go out and I like to call the wilderness. I'll go out to like creeks and like just play with rocks and build things and collect things, and I would always draw, and I just did a lot of things on my own. So I had liberty because I was always concerned about being judged for my ideas. So I would go out and I spent a lot of secluded time, but that was my liberty to be creative in my own way. No one watched me. And I would, it's interesting, I would build like booklets, because I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think I could be, but I would still try to build like my own books and like draw. It was like cartoonish books, and I just had a lot of fun when I was little. I was so weird, but I loved it, every moment of it.
What's up, Q? Hey, proud of you, man. I've been to school with Q, so this is really powerful. I learned a lot from him about leadership. But question for you, man. I think it's really cool when people discover their creative outlet, and you have to really get in the zone to release it. So how do you get in the zone when you're writing? I think people need to know how you release your artistic expression, talent.
I talk to myself a lot, all the time.
I hear it all the time.
But, and I talk in poems, so I'm not your traditional go to the coffee shop, open up a notebook and just write. I have to, if I'm walking around the house, I will be just randomly saying like, create poems from my mind, and I will just write them down in my notebook or like my phone. I read a lot. He encouraged me to do that, and I think that's a very essential way I develop my writing skills, is reading a lot. I read so much, and what I do is I highlight unique lines, and I will rewrite the line in my way. I'll paraphrase it, and that's like I said, it's the things I do is just so draining. I go beyond. It's just too much sometimes. Every word I don't know, I will write it down and I will make my own sentence. I'm always paraphrasing. And like when someone, this is so weird, I have a lot of close friends. If they say anything that's profound to me, I'll write it down and I will reread it, and then I will try to reiterate it in my own way. So and that's just how I reiterate, and I like revise a lot of things. And I love jazz music, so when you came in, if you came in early and heard jazz music, I'm always in my car and I'll play like an instrumental, and I'll just zone out, and I'll be like in love zone or something, and I'll just be going off on the top of my head, and I'm like, oh, that sounds good, I'm writing that down. So you might think I'm texting driving, but I'm actually texting and writing a poem.
Yeah, I'm right.
We'll take a couple more questions.
So as you know, I'm an educator, but I'm curious about your take on the argument that many of our children, particularly Black boys, are attracted to special education, whether or not they truly have a disability. And I struggle as a special education teacher whether or not my children really truly have a disability or regular education teachers couldn't teach them, right? So I'm curious about your sentiments on that based on your experiences and the things that you struggle with. And you mentioning that not necessarily being about a disability, but that you learned differently, right? You had different strengths that you didn't realize, and how your take, being an educator now and working with you, what your sentiments are.
By the way, she's also a performance artist as well. She's amazing. She's a teacher and she's a poet, so give her a round of applause. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about. I think oftentimes we respond to people based off their demographics, based off their category. And I think what you pay attention to grows. I think oftentimes when you see a kid who, particularly a minority kid, let's just be honest, there is oftentimes a negative portrayal of young adults, young African-American adults. And I think we like to overgeneralize. So when we see a behavior that's not deemed normative, we categorize that. And we place a label on that. And we tell them that you shouldn't be that way. And in fact, not only you shouldn't be that way, we're going to do what we can to sort of kind of like really continue to build on that. Okay, you portrayed yourself like you're an idiot, we're going to treat you that way. And I had a lot of experiences where people responded to me based merely off of how I react to certain situations. If I was acting up in the classroom, having anger outbursts, or being, disruptive, that's the response I got from the teachers and educators. So I was labeled, and they didn't really know me. But I think when you begin to develop a sensitivity and you try to look beyond the category, try to look beyond the exterior, and try to really engage with that individual youth, you will find something profound. And something that will change your whole paradigm of thinking. I thought this kid, although he has this label, I thought that this is who he was, but he is greater than that. Now, how can we nurture that? So that's my response. That makes sense.
We'll take one more question.
As a poet, I'm curious about like your journey with having writer's block or having difficulty communicating what you're trying to say in a poem, or if you had that issue, then how you overcame it.
I have writer's block every day. I have it at work. I have it when I write poems, when I'm talking to people, all the time. But I'm persistent. I will look at a computer, I'm like, I'm going to get it out one way or another. So, and also how I combat that is by recognizing the stuff I have already created. If I can do this, if I can write a book, I can write a poem. If I can write a poem, I can write a case plan. I'm a social worker. I just came out that way. I'm sorry. But so I tend to develop that understanding that I have done this before. So if I've done it before, why can't I do it again? And that's what helps me to be able to like overcome writer's block. And another thing I'm going to share with you, I still struggle with writing, believe it or not. Like I will spend, and I like to talk about my work context too, because not only I'm a poet, I'm a caseworker at Franklin County Children's Services. I see a lot of familiar faces out here. So yeah, give Children's Services a round of applause. We're doing some great work. I will spend an average, it might take someone to write maybe a minute to put together an email. It'll take me literally probably like 5 to 10 minutes. And it's very discouraging and unnerving, but I always remind myself, for me to produce quality, I have to bear challenges. For me to produce quality, I have to bear challenges. And I'm gonna keep on bearing them, I'm gonna keep on writing, I'm gonna keep on writing, I'm gonna keep on writing. And I think, and when you look back at the product, you're like, oh, okay. It took me maybe an hour to produce this material, but I produced it. So it ain't how you start, it's how you finish.
Mr. Sutton, can I say one thing? Sure. Chris, he brought up a couple ideas through his conversation. I want to speak in particular to educators here tonight. And it's funny because I wrote down some notes just in case some things came my way tonight, and he brought up those ideas. And one is the power of words. And the word disability in and of itself is definitive. It tells you where the finish line is. You can't do that. You ain't gonna make it. And although we can't change what the Ohio Department of Education or what DC or what lawmakers call it, you do have control of how you talk about it. And using words like deficits or difficulties when you're having conversation with your students and with their parents is a lot better, because a deficit tells you where the starting line is, not where the finish line is. And yeah, that starting line may be 10 yards back, but that doesn't mean that you're not in the race or that you can't finish the race. That's right. And second is he spoke a lot to resiliency and keeping going and keeping going and keeping going. And if there's any message for really everyone, is that you have to have grit. I'm not talking about hominies, and I'm not talking about what you put your butter and your sugar on. I'm talking about grit. I'm talking about tenacity, stick-to-itiveness, staying after it, persistence, getting knocked down and standing back up. Those are the ability and willingness to persevere through that is really what's going to empower your students. Focusing on their strengths, saying, look what you have done, what can't you do, and that's going to give them the grit to be successful.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. I think that's a good place to wrap up the question and answer. So I'm going to ask Mr. Harris if he can join me over here right next to me so that we can pull some of these tickets for free copies of Mr. Harris's book, Nothing But Skin. So they're going to close us out with a spoken word piece and saxophone. They asked if I would sing, but I declined. And so I'm going to come off the stage here, and I will let them take us out. Thank you all again for coming out.
Tell you a little bit about Wesley Perry. He's a good friend of mine. I wrote a poem entitled Detroit Saxophone, which is about a kid who plays the saxophone because he believes by playing music he can heal his city. I read that Detroit is the poorest, largest city, so that's why I chose Detroit as a context. He actually recorded a song for this particular poem, and we actually, it was professionally recorded. So it's on his album, what's it called? Breaking Ground. So I'm on there. Yeah. This is a really good album. Like, his band is amazing. So I want to thank him for actually writing this song. And yeah, so Hope you enjoy. And I don't remember the poem, unfortunately, because it's been too long since I performed, but I'm reading the book. Of a decaying apartment building in downtown Detroit, a young boy holds an old saxophone with his broken fingers. He plays musicals, the only voice for his forgotten neighborhood. He plays for the tears of the ghetto in reeking urban schools. He plays for the children without bicycles. He plays for the children with rotten playgrounds. He plays for the empty walls. He plays for his mother who provides with a crumble of dollar in her purse. Music gives his mother faith. Faith keeps her alive. He plays for the people who only see the sun during lunch breaks, and for people who post on porches watching their dream drive by. He plays for his friend Devin, whose home is a spoiled refrigerator. His family eat crumbs from the tiny kitchen table. He plays for the ashes of lost bodies that pace on street corners. His grandfather's stomach, the cost of empty beer bottles, the homeless who still dream on cardboard boxes, the border of churches who see the sun while he sheds its skin. He plays for crime. Infested neighborhoods without a first aid kit, a crying ghetto, broken showcase of small children, concerned parents, every dead end, the swollen eyes of TV screens crying sad news. On his streets, graves are as common as potholes, dogs bark incessantly, everyone is afraid for their lives. During an explosion of Detroit gunshots, his gold saxophone shot 3 times, urban tunes come pouring from his bruised fingers. He doesn't write songs. No one has ever taught him how to write. No one has ever taught him how to spell. But one day, he picked up a pencil and began sketching 100 little saxophones on a piece of notebook paper. He wrote, "I play for you," the best way he could.
But they can't meet after school, so got to figure out